Well, Christy, Deanna, and Jen, thank you so much for participating in this conversation about reimagining VBS. You guys are just incredible leaders that I have so much respect for. And when I look at you, it really feels like as you're processing VBS and summer outreach ministry for the summer, you've just been what feels like 3 or 4 weeks ahead of us in your processing and planning. And, Christy, some are delaying their camps until the end of summer for obvious reasons. Different states, different areas of the world are handling reopening differently. And obviously there's still a lot that we don't know, but I'm wondering from your perspective, what do you think needs to be considered if a leader is going to be delaying VBS? What do they need to consider for how they communicate that, not only to their teams, but to the families in their communities?
Yeah, as we were processing this question in our context, one of the things that I wanted to communicate right out the front to my team is that the option to delay reminds everybody that decisions for Christ are made at camp. And so if we can agree that there were children who would come to camp this summer, then delaying communicates a hope that we will still be able to be in relationship with those kids and lead them to Jesus. Yeah. So firstly, delay communicates hope. And that hope first has to come from you. It feels like a hopeless situation in some parts of the world, in some parts of each of our countries, even just in pockets, in regional outbreaks. Mm-hmm. But we know that our hope is a firm foundation and isn't a wish. And so when we communicate the possibility of delay, we have very directly communicated hope, and that really matters. But I think there's 3 things that we need to communicate, not just to our teams, but also to our families. One would be that a delay in camp is not a delay in planning. That even the consideration of delay means you're starting to plan now. Whether the planning, whether what you can offer looks completely different from what you would have normally offered, as you delay, you are planning. You're planning for what all of your options are based on the phases in your area. And so you're proactively thinking. And when we think proactively, we build trust with those who are serving alongside of us, and for those who are entrusting their children to us. The one word of gratitude I've had for the last month in speaking with families was thank you for being proactive. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of programs, camps, organizations that have fallen silent during this time just because they don't know. And so our communication tells our families and teams that we aren't unsure about planning. We're just unsure what it looks like when we're done planning.
That's good.
Some of the team, whether they're volunteer or staff, have been through this crisis differently than us. Some of them may have been unemployed, and they really, really, really need to know if you will be employing them. So those direct and specific conversations about what we do know really matter, as long as we're not making promises we can't keep. Yeah. So no pie in the sky conversations right now. Direct, specific, honest communication that says we're planning either way. The second thing I would say is know your people. And if you don't know what they need or want this summer, ask them, survey them. Would they even want to gather? Would they even be willing to drop off their children if you were allowed to gather? Again, do you know? I was shocked. We surveyed over 500 families for our camp, and I thought there's no way they want camp. Even if we can gather, they're going to be much more interested in an alternative plan. Over 95% of respondents said they would register their kids for a regular camp program given the opportunity. That blew my mind because it was the exact opposite of what I expected. I expected high caution. That's not where they're at. What they don't want is more material that they don't have time to unpack or that they're not sure. The alternative Camp in a Box program is 50-50 for my families. I need to pay attention to that. Yeah. So ask them what they need. Maybe they just need food. Maybe you're blessing them with a food hamper instead of Camp in a Box because, my goodness, do not give me one more thing to entertain my children. Maybe it's a conversation with another grown-up. Yeah. Asking them what they need beyond what you think you're going to offer really matters. Know your sheep and shepherd them specifically for what they need in this season, not just what they want or their kids want.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is over communicate safety.
Yeah.
So while we would all assume that we're each sanitizing toys and cleaning up after camp and all the slime workshops and all the cupcake baking, of course we're sanitizing. Now we're telling everybody what we're doing to sanitize.
Yeah.
So even if it's how we packed camp in a box, if that's where your church or your context lands, you're going to communicate the safety because that builds trust. And right now, relationship does not have presence. This is how we do relationship. And without presence, that trust can become a bit of a teeter-totter.
Yeah.
Without the ability of being together and having spontaneous, joyful conversations. Yeah. So building trust looks different in this season. And in order to continue to have good relationship with your families, as you're communicating delays, you're communicating what's safe, what's allowed, what public health is saying, what makes sense for the people that you gather, given their ages, what's possible versus what's responsible. Mm-hmm. And so the over communication of each of those things will build a trust that not only allows whatever program you offer this summer to flourish, you will see, I believe, a flourishing next year as well because of what you did to prepare families this year.
Yeah, that's really good. So there's something there that I think is important for us to extract is that there's a two-way communication piece to this, not just one way. So really inviting that two-way communication back and forth between you and the sheep that you're serving. But also just not viewing that communication through the lens of like, oh, I don't want to do this, but this is an opportunity to build trust. This is an opportunity to have relationship around something that's hard, but could be very hope-filled. Is that like,
yes.
Are those?
Absolutely. And the other piece of that is communication with your team isn't a downward dump of what's been communicated to you. Yeah. My team for camp, they're Gen Zs. They know stuff about what's possible on the internet that I just don't at me with all that. Like, you just go do your thing. Like, you're much better at this. And so what I've learned by asking a young staff good questions, I know what they need. I know what they're worried about, but I also know what they're capable of.
That's good.
And so the things that I wouldn't have needed them to be good at if we were gathering, I needed you to be really, really, really good with kids when you applied for this job. Now I need you to be really, really, really good at creating something that kids want to get in front of. Mm-hmm. That might be a totally different person. Mm-hmm. But here's what's true about your team. God knew this before you selected them. He selected them. He appointed them and anointed them for this season. And there could be in their mind, oh, I wish we could do this at camp. And now we can. And God himself had planted that dream of something more that wasn't necessary in a traditional camp setting, but might be vital to an alternative program. And I love that God already knows those students and has equipped them in a way that will bring him glory that we may not have ever realized prior to this.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's so good. Hey, Jen, so some leaders, it might not be possible for them to do a delay. Some of them are very likely having to either proceed with some, like, moves towards some sort of modification, or they might be deciding, like, are we going to delay or are we going to proceed with a modification? So some might be in that tension. What are some of the key pieces of information you're looking for that would help you to know whether to proceed with a new date, like to push it back, or to move toward a modification option like a virtual VBS? What are the things that you would need to know to be able to discern that?
Absolutely. So I would be wanting to have some pretty intentional and serious conversations with my leadership first. Like, what where are you guys at? Where's our senior pastor at? What's he thinking? Who's the person who's above me? What are they thinking? What are their thoughts on Vacation Bible School now, Vacation Bible School virtual, Vacation Bible School later? Where are they landing? Because I think that we need to be, as Christy said, we need to be over communicating, and we need to be over communicating up with our people, and we need to be over communicating down with our people. So the people who are in charge of us and the people that we are in charge of, or that we have stewardship over. Yeah. So I want to know, what are their thoughts and what are their hopes and their dreams for Vacation Bible School or our summer outreach this year? Mm-hmm. The next thing I want to know is what's our government agency? What's our governing health authorities? What are they saying? What are they suggesting? Do we have the possibility to meet together?
Yeah.
Do we not? Yeah. And it's different in so many places, and it's changing daily. So, again, it puts us in a hard place to make decisions like that, and everybody is recognizing that. But God is sovereign, and he knows where we're at. He knows what's going to happen in the next day, in the next 2 weeks, in the next 2 months. Yeah. And that's just a comfort that we definitely need to rest in.
Yeah.
So you want to know what your leadership is saying. You want to know what your governing authorities are saying. And then I want to know, what are my people saying? Yeah. And, right now, as a mom who's doing just a tiny little bit of school at home, because I have one first grader, with a bunch of younger kids behind her, I am saying, like, I don't want to do more virtual. Like, that is me personally. But is that the overarching view of what your people are saying? Are they saying that as well? Or are they saying, no, this would be a great option? The one caveat to all of that, though, is that school is going to end. Yeah. School is going to end, and it will be different. And so I think that we need to keep that in mind as well. Absolutely. When school is over, and for us, it's in 2 weeks, when school is over, what is it going to be like then? Will we be wanting to have those summer activities? Because we won't be playing baseball right now, or we won't be playing soccer, or whatever else your kid would be involved in. Are they looking for something? I can speak to my family, and my kids are missing their people. Mm. They miss their friends so desperately. And I would say that's probably pretty consistent across the board for your people as well. And so if we are able to delay, if we're able to do virtual with some kind of interactive piece here, I think that we need to know, what do our families want? How are we going to love and serve our kids? Mm-hmm. And so I guess those are kind of the things that I'm looking for as I'm thinking through making any kind of shift, virtual, delay, not at all. Like, how are we going to love and serve? How are we going to communicate? And how are we going to really just engage, love, and share the hope of Jesus in this season of uncertainty, where our kids are missing their friends, where our parents are overwhelmed, and where our leadership is saying, we don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So the alignment with your governing authorities, with your senior leadership, critically important, but also being aligned with, where is your community feeling that tension? What do they need? And I think you made a great point of how critical it is when we take the temperature. And so I think that's something we need to pray for discernment about, is when do we take the temperature to make that decision? Exactly. Because there might be a fever in a couple of weeks when school is over. So I think that's important for us to consider. Deanna, so you made a decision to pivot and to do a modification. What key factors did you consider that influenced how you pivoted in providing VBS for families in your community?
Well, it's so interesting because back in December, I really felt God calling us to focus on the partnering with parents element of faith and of our mission statement, and look at where we are. We're 100% faith at home. And so for me, it was a little bit easier to pivot to that faith at home continuation, because God had already given me this vision and this passion. And we had started educating, doing a lot of intentional stuff with our families, we have, we've called all our families multiple times just to check on them and see how they are. That's something that's super important. And we don't have 500 families like Christy, so we can do it. But even if you did, you have lots of staff and volunteers that, while a lot of them are overwhelmed with school, what we've provided online from church has been a consistent, that's so refreshing. It's such a break. It's so encouraging to see. So we have about the same number of families participating in our online worship as we did prior to the break, and in physical services. So that's a gauge that we have. And then we have online weekly contests and things like that. So some areas have issues with technology, and it's not available to their communities because of different aspects. And so that is a concern to look at, but it hasn't been a concern for us. So those two things were big for us, but we also will end school in a week or two, and we have a smaller window to do VBS at home, or VBS, because we have in-person camp scheduled for July. Yeah. And we don't want VBS to be delayed and take the place of camp. Yeah. And so that was a factor. We have teachers start back to school the last week in July if everything is as scheduled. So you have to go with, okay, this is how it is right now. It might change, but we can't delay it too late in July because you have all your great volunteers who are teachers that are back into school mode. So we felt like delaying wasn't an option. And so that's kind of like, okay, the whole calendar, for the summer, what if you delay something, what is it going to take the place of or bump? Yeah. And because camp is so important to us, and camp may not happen, and we know that, but we would rather save that option as open, yeah. And do a Faith at Home VBS.
Yeah. So. I think, excuse me, I think one of the things that is really standing out to me about what you're saying is how important it was for you to know your core values in making those decisions around pivoting. So I think that's something that I would just really encourage everybody watching today to go back to your core values. If you're kind of in that tension of do we make the pivot or not, you have to consider, your priorities and what you value. So, man, Christy, with just that reminder to view communication through a hope-filled lens of being able to build trust and that it's two-way. And Jen, just the importance of alignment and when we take the temperature, and Deanna, of how critical it is to be making decisions based on our core values. There's a lot of wisdom here for those who are kind of in that tension between delay, pivot. So I just want to thank you for sharing your wisdom with us, and thank you for being a part of this today.